And just to clarify, then we're just throwing the Hawaiian shirts to the wind.
No, this is one. Okay, hang on. Let me just get one. Honestly. Mm,
Hey guys, welcome to the Nikta and Jason show. I'm Nikta and that's Jason.
Hello.
And today we are going to tackle the topic of code reuse, the mythical creature of reusable code. Um, Jason, you were saying earlier that I kind of mentioned some of this stuff in a rant I had in an earlier episode that we will link down below about tech debt, right? Because maybe I conflate those two topics. But why don't you tell us, briefly, like what are we talking about when we say code reuse, so that I don't conflate topics again?
Okay, so the idea of reusing code is that there is you have code that's been written for a certain situation, solves a certain problem, and then there is a adjacent problem that's very similar, and you should be able to reuse the code you wrote for this similar problem. So you have one problem here, solves it. This other problem, you should be able to solve it with the same code. That's code reuse. Nikta, now that you know what code reuse is, or briefly, what do you think of code reuse?
Well, I'll just very, very, very briefly reiterate the rant that I already think I went on in the tech debt one, which is that in my experience, it seems that everybody wants to write reusable code and nobody wants to use reusable code. Like engineers will be like, a product manager or somebody else will be like, oh, didn't that other department in our company do something very similar? We should be able to just like grab that and get her out in a week, right? Just ship the feature really quickly. And then engineers will be like, oh no, I mean, that doesn't really apply here, and it's just like all different business logic and stuff. But then in my head, I'm like, but I thought it's like most of it is there. And like, yeah, of course I understand that you have to like tweak the business logic and like make it fit our very specific use case. But like, isn't most of it there? It's like a permissions framework or a notifications framework or something that's just like so standard. Like, can't we just use some of that? No, it doesn't apply to us. But then, and this is why I relate it back to technical debt, is because a lot of the times engineers will say to me, no, we should go and rewrite this whole thing, this feature that customers are already using and are benefiting from and whatever. We should put a bunch of time into rewriting it in order to make it more reusable and to clean it up and to make it more performant and, legitimate things and stuff for sure, but also to make it more reusable. And then it's going to make us be able to go even faster on other types of features that we want to build. So it just seems to me like everybody wants to build and write reusable code, but then nobody ever seems to use the reusable code. So I don't get it. What am I missing? I don't get it.
So you're right in that the engineers are, I think their intentions are good and they think they're going to be rewriting or they're writing reusable code, but they're not. And reuse tends not to be worth it, actually, is my real opinion. But that's kind of what it is. It's like, oh, well, we'll just write this thing. And they think they're writing it in a way that lets them move from problem A to problem B. But there's all kinds of little specifics in problem A that they thought they were generalizing, but they're not. They're actually really specific to problem A. And then they kind of get hung up. Like, oh yeah, we rewrote this reusable component. And then you try it again in this second scenario and it's like, oh shit, there's tons of stuff we didn't consider. And so, maybe they get the chance and they do get to tweak it and change it. And so they take what they solved in A, they apply it to B, they make some tweaks so that they can solve A and B with this new code. And then they get it, oh, hey, let's reuse it for problem C. And problem C still doesn't quite fit. But once you do C, you're probably there. It's probably reusable. D, E, F will validate, and then you're done. You have a reusable component probably. And most engineering teams, again, depends on the culture, depends on a lot of things, but the knowledge of the programmer, all kinds of things. Chances are they don't know that it's reusable yet when they're saying this. Oh, we'll write reusable code and it'll apply to everything. It's amazing. I'm an amazing developer. And they just don't realize what it takes to write a reusable component, because you don't get reuse by accident. It's not something that you just kind of like, hey, I'll just write some code and poof, it's reusable. You need to focus on the reuse. You need to focus on where the places that require tweaking make it easy to tweak. And there's all kinds of little things you have to think about for reusable code. And if you're just writing code to ship a feature, you shouldn't assume it's reusable at all.
I have a question.
You shouldn't, as the PM, but hopefully they shouldn't. And I'm not even sure that you should try to make it reusable on the first pass there. Like, oh, we've got to solve this problem. Just solve the problem. That's it. You aced it. You got your.
Because I can hear the screaming mobs of engineers who I've worked with being like, whoa. It's by just solving that very specific, narrow problem that we got to the spaghetti mess of code that we got to. And that's why now, and this is why to me these two topics are so interrelated. It's like now we have all this tech debt because it's like, to your definition of tech debt from that earlier episode of like, we just want to get it out quickly. So we're just going to solve the very specific use case that we're trying to solve, and knowing that, we're not doing it in a very reusable way or something.
Right.
Now you end up with all these like forks in the road in your code and stuff. Right. And so what do you say to that? If you're saying it's not even worth it to take the time to like future proof a little bit, like what do you say to that accumulation of garbage?
You don't, yes. So you don't initially know what's going to be reusable or what should be made to be reusable. You just don't know when you start out on a particular, like, let's say, there's a whole flow of screens you're going to start doing. So none of it's been made yet. You kind of know what the problem is, but you haven't done any of it yet. You can't, as an engineer, you shouldn't be promising that you can make this stuff reusable the first pass. You're going to work on the problem for a few months. Then you're going to start getting a feel for how this problem kind of changes and gets solved, and all the tweaks you do need to, all the places where you need to make the thing tweakable to be used as a reusable library or module or whatever you're going to call it. You don't know that when you start out. There are things that you can, as a senior engineer, there's things you can, like, okay, I think there's some little pieces here that we can end up just using all the time. But it takes, explicit design of the software to make it reusable. And if you don't build that in or don't account for it, so it's just not going to be reusable.
I guess I just think that so much stuff when you're first describing a feature, so many concepts, like we don't create net new things, right? We just put the same ingredients together in different ways in software, quite frankly. There's very little, or I shouldn't say there's very little innovation. There's so much innovation, but there's also so much that's common over and over and over again, right? You need to sort something. You need to
That's all done for you. That's all done for you by thousands of other programmers who've built the core library.
Okay.
Who built all these little frameworks that kind of come for free with your compiler. That all that very general stuff, that's all done for you, and
So
you
so
don't
what's
have
a
to.
good example? So what's a good example that's not as like table stakesy and like simple as sorting that we can use? Like I don't know, like let's say I was creating like let's say Instagram stories and the
Yeah.
concept of being able to like it or respond to it or react to it or something. Like uh, in the moment you might say, okay, well the problem here is that users want to be able to like react to your story, so we need to just solve that problem. But really there's all types of objects in the app that users could react to, not just stories, right? So wouldn't you immediately go like, okay, well this should be its own separate like thing that gets reused on any type of object? Am
Yeah.
I on track?
Well,
Like,
yeah, probably. And by the time stories came out, Instagram had modeled the code that way. Yeah. And so then the PM asks, "Oh, can we also like these things and write comments on them?" Oh yeah, sure. Because they've solved the problem in a general way that anything that they introduce can be commented upon or liked. But if you've never, if you only have one thing that you've ever commented upon or liked, then uh, you have to make there's things that you've done or shortcuts or assumptions you've made that you have to like walk back and change so that you can then like your second thing.
um, last question for you. Actually, I think I had two questions, but I can't remember one of them. What is more important? Like for lack of a better word, I'll call it the maturity of the developer who is attempting, by that I mean like experience and seniority level and stuff
Mm-hmm.
of the developer who's trying to write reusable code, or the maturity of the company and or application to take the time to step back and say, okay, we've done this whole liking thing enough times that we should really spin it out into it being its own reusable thing rather than like rewriting it every time for every object that we create.
I don't think it's a. I think it's a false choice. My first question would be, why would we want to generalize this? Why would you want to generalize liking to it? You know, what do we get out of it? What do you
Because
get out of
now,
reuse?
well,
Like, there's
because
this like mythical thing about reuse, which is like, if we just made this code reusable, we could solve all our problems, and it's not.
well, hold on though, Jason. It's like, well, you can like a comment, you can like a photo, you can like a post, you can like a story, you can like somebody's reaction to your reaction. Like you can like so many things. So at some point, it's like, God damn it, PMs, we've now rewritten this thing 5 different times. Just give us an order to like refactor it all and make it so that next time you dream up some new
Right.
object, it just automatically gets the likes along with it.
Yeah. Okay, so then that you're like, years into solving this problem, and you know exactly now all the things you need to account for liking a thing, and then you can encode it all. And then if you're going to have this brand
So
new thing that you have to like,
your
you
answer
have to
then
take the
is maturity of the app, is maturity of the business. That's what you're saying. It's like you've now validated that liking is going to be a thing that you're going to keep. It's not going to go
right.
away.
Okay,
Like,
yeah,
it was
yeah.
validated or whatever. Now you take the time. Now you understand how to build it right.
And it's in your right, and it's like associated with your brand. Say that like liking a thing is associated with your brand, and so therefore, yes, and you will have encountered all the cases where you will have liked something, and so then yeah, you have this nice bulletproof like module that does all the liking you could ever want.
So much.
So I think you said something else about all these developers complain about spaghetti, or yeah, spaghetti. So it's messy. Maybe it's messy, but if you throw away the notion of reusability on the first pass, your code's less messy because you've made the choice not to make it reusable. There's another form of code called lasagna, where you have kind of tried to a priori make it reusable, and that is just as unusable as spaghetti code, in that you have to tweak so many things and know so much about this reusable framework you've been given that you could actually do it faster if you just solved it specifically. And so then you have to make this balance, like, and again, you later on in the company's age or like an experience, and so they've built up all this institutional knowledge, you're going to want to go with the lasagna, not the spaghetti, because the lasagna is going to account for all of these little things that you've encountered before, and everyone's forgotten, but it's embedded in the code there.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're first getting started, spaghetti.
Man, I'll
the spaghetti.
further because I have questions about duplication of code and duplication of effort and the real costs of that, or the best.
Yeah,
I have so much around this topic. I'm going to add it to the episode list because, like,
yeah,
we could make a whole separate episode where you try to explain friggin' microservices to me. Oh my God, don't even start me on that rant.
I have to do some Googling first.
Okay, so let's leave it at that. This is one episode, you guys, developers who have been on my team in the past, who have talked about code reuse. I know that you don't agree with some of the things that Jason has said in this video. Please set him straight in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.